So we're back in the school garden with Connie, and today we are going to create a new garden bed using, it's called lasagna gardening, or hugelkultur is another word, and Connie will tell you all about that.
Hi, another beautiful day in Tofino. My heart is always here. So what we're doing today is we're converting this area, which has very thin soil. This whole area had extremely thin soil, and it's just amazing what they've done with this area. But what we're doing is this area is a bit low. This one corner is a bit low, and so what we'd like to do is turn it into a more productive area, someplace that holds water so it doesn't just run off, and someplace that we can plant more plants. So there is an old squash plant here. Sometimes when you're building a garden bed, there'll be weeds. It's a good idea to, this is very herbaceous, so it doesn't really matter. I'll just kind of pull that out because it is finished. Sometimes you can just cut the weeds down, like even if the weeds are this high, go through and cut them off in pieces so that there's a lot of small pieces, and then you can build your garden bed right on top of that. If it's lawn, you can build your garden bed right on top of that. So what we're going to do today, though, is we're going to combine a lasagna bed with a hugelkultur bed, sort of a modified hugelkultur bed. And so the idea of hugelkultur is that there's a certain amount of rotting material that holds moisture in the soil. And so it works best with some kind of deciduous material, like this is some cuttings from some apple trees. But what works really good is if you can find some, say, alder that's already starting to rot, or any kind of wood shavings works just as good. But what this will do is, as the excuse me, as the fungi start to break this down, they hold moisture as they're breaking this down, and so they form, like you can imagine how damp a mushroom feels. Well, the mushroom mycelium is what's going to invade this pile, and it's going to slowly break this down, and the whole time holding moisture within it. And so we are going to lay these sticks down to provide that extra bit of moisture, especially because this is on a slope, and so the moisture might just run right off. If we don't have something holding the moisture, this is going to dry out really quickly. So I'm going to put a lot of the rough stuff down first. The next thing we have is we have some seaweed, and that will kind of weight this stuff down. Remember, all this is going to break down into organic matter. So this is almost like building a compost right in place. And your richest soil is always in your compost or underneath your compost. And so this will be a really nice place to put a squash or some really heavy feeder, and it'll probably fill this whole corner. Also, just like any kind of compost, you want to put in some high carbon material, layer the carbon material with some of the other materials. And so we have some of this hay here, and because it does have some weed seeds in it, we're going to put it in one of the lower layers rather than the upper layer, and just build it up like this. Now you can do this as big as you want. We're just doing this small corner to address this one area. Another thing that we have here is we have some kelp. And kelp is really good, and it looks like it's going to just be really chunky, but it will actually break down quite nicely, and it provides any kind of seaweed, provides your plants with really good disease resistance. The seaweed just has minerals in it, well, for humans and for people. that really help reduce stress and plant stress and people stress. And so as this breaks down, this is going to provide a wealth of micronutrients and minerals to all the plants that are growing here. So I think it's about time we will fill this in a little bit more with some more of this. This is Timothy hay, and evidently this is sourced from an organic farmer in Port, and so we know it's nice and clean, which is great. And that just kind of fills in the air spaces just a little bit. Here, if we tuck it in between the seaweed, and this will rot quite nicely. Now, if you're in a really dry climate, you would probably water this right now. I have no fear that this will dry out this winter in Tofino. So I am not worried about that at all. So the other thing we're going to put on here is we're going to put some composted manure, partially composted manure. And that's what's nice about these lasagna beds, especially if you're building them in the fall, is that things don't have to be completely composted in order to go into your lasagna bed, because it is kind of a compost as it is. So this will just really get things decomposing. All the microbes in this manure will really get things decomposing. And you don't have to recreate this exactly like I have here with the exact materials I have here. You can use any kind of organic matter you have. If you have a composter that has some organic materials in it that maybe aren't 100% composted, as long as they don't smell strong, you can layer those in the bottom of this bed as well, and that's a really good place for them. If you build it this time of the year, the manure doesn't have to be as composted. If you build this in the spring, I would suggest if you're using it for greens or something that the manure be a little bit more composted than what this is. So the next layer, you have a couple of choices with the next layer. And, oh, that's just paper tape, that can stay. And so this next layer is here for a couple of different reasons. This next layer is a cardboard layer or a newspaper layer. If you are using newspaper, you want to use 6 sheets of newspaper. So that is enough so that if there's any weed seeds in here, they can germinate all right, but they're not going to get enough light to grow. And so the cardboard or 6 sheets of newspaper takes that sort of worry out of it. So you can put any kind of undecomposed weed seeds in here even, but they're not going to grow maybe around the edges, but they're not going to grow in the middle. So that's a great way to suppress a weedy bed as well. Now I'm just going to put a few handfuls of soil on this. You can open up a bag of soil and put it on here, or if you have some good compost, you can put it on. Any kind of soil at all helps weight down the cardboard, helps moisten everything up. And if you had a plant to plant, and fall is a great time to be planting because the soil is still warm and the air temperatures are getting cooler, and that's exactly what stimulates root growth in plants. So if you were planting a plant in here, what you would do is you would actually dig the hole first, plant the plant, and then put this lasagna bed around it for a mulch. But if you were doing seeds, or if you plan to use this for seeds in the spring, then you could just leave it like this and maybe mulch over it with some leaves. And if you did put a thick enough layer of the soil here, or if you use newspaper, this would be quite fine to plant in even really now. If you put enough soil on top of the cardboard, you could plant in it now. If you did it now and wanted to plant in the spring, I would still put a little bit more soil on top of it. The other thing that you can do if you've got transplants is come the spring, you can just cut holes in this cardboard and lay it down and then stick the plant's roots through and then mulch back over it. But this is a little lasagna bed, and once the leaves get wet, they're not going to blow around. And so what you will have is an excellent little planting bed here for the spring.